A Viking walks into a market in the trading town of Hedeby. He wants to buy a pair of boots. He has no coins, no wallet, no card. What he has is a silver arm ring on his wrist, a small pair of scales in his belt pouch, and a knife. He takes out the knife. He cuts a piece off the arm ring. He puts the piece on the scale. The merchant puts a small weight on the other side. The scale balances. Transaction complete. He walks out with the boots. This is how Vikings paid for things. Before we go further, one question for the comments. If you had to carry your wealth on your body right now, how would you do it? Leave your answer below. We will come back to this. The answer to how Vikings paid for things changes completely depending on what period you are asking about, who you are asking about, and what they were buying. The Viking payment system was not one system. It was several systems layered on top of each other, evolving across 3 centuries, stretching from the beaches of Newfoundland to the markets of Baghdad. Understanding it requires starting at the beginning. In the earliest period of the Viking Age, from roughly the 6th century up to the start of the 9th century, the dominant system was barter. You had something, someone else wanted it. They had something you wanted. You made an exchange: sheep for grain, timber for fish, labor for food. This is how most of the world operated at the time. It was simple, direct, and deeply limited. Barter only works when 2 people happen to want exactly what each other has. The moment trade becomes more complex, when you have 3 parties involved, or when what you have is too large to split, or when someone wants something you do not currently own, barter begins to collapse. Vikings encountered this limitation quickly. As they began trading further, and building larger settlements, the barter system became inadequate. You cannot carry a shipload of cattle across the North Sea and expect to find someone who has exactly what you need in exactly the right quantity on the other end, so they moved to something more flexible. Silver, not coins, not yet, just silver. Weighed silver, any silver. Silver in any form: arm rings, neck rings, ingots, bars, jewelry, fragments of foreign coins, scraps cut from larger pieces. The metal itself was the currency, and what determined its value was not its shape or its origin, but one thing only: its weight. This system is called a bullion economy, and it is one of the most practical monetary inventions in human history. Here is how it worked in practice. Viking traders often carried small scales and sets of weights, typically made of lead or bronze, which allowed them to weigh silver during transactions. Archaeological finds across Scandinavia and Viking trading centers frequently include such scales, confirming their widespread use. The scales were small enough to carry in a belt pouch. The weights were standardized: a set of small lead or bronze discs, each representing a known amount. When a transaction needed to happen, both parties got out their scales. The silver was weighed. If it did not match the agreed price, pieces were added or removed until it did. The transaction was recorded in nobody's ledger. It happened between 2 people with scales and silver, and was complete when the scale balanced. This is the hacksilver system, and hacksilver is one of the most fascinating objects in all of Viking Age archaeology. Hacksilver consisted of pieces of silver cut or hacked from larger objects, like jewelry or silverware, and then used as a rudimentary form of currency wherever people from Viking societies lived. Think about what this means for a piece of Viking jewelry. An arm ring was not just a decorative object or a status symbol, though it was both of those things. It was also a portable bank account. A wealthy Viking wearing 6 silver arm rings was not just showing off. He was carrying the equivalent of a wallet full of money on his body, and if he needed to make a large purchase, he could take one ring off and hand it over. If he needed to make a smaller purchase, he took out his knife and cut a piece off. It was possible to pay with hacksilver, a silver ingot, or a silver arm ring that was cut into pieces of a suitable size and weight. Today, there are many finds of cut-up silver coins from the Viking Age. The cuts were deliberate. The pieces were not random. A trader who had been in the business long enough knew roughly how much silver a certain size piece represented, and the scales confirmed it precisely. The system worked because both parties had scales and both parties understood weight. But silver had to come from somewhere, and this is where the Viking economy connects to something much larger. Scandinavia was poor in precious metals. There were no significant silver mines in Norway, Denmark, or Sweden during the Viking Age. All of the silver that flowed through the Viking economy came from outside, from raids, from trade, from tribute payments extorted from neighboring kingdoms, from the accumulated looting of 3 centuries of expansion. The largest single source of silver in the Viking Age was not English monasteries or Frankish towns. It was the Islamic world. The primary source of wealth in the Viking world, particularly from the 8th to the 11th centuries, was the Islamic dirham. Through massive trade networks stretching across the Volga and Dnieper rivers, Viking traders often called the Rus exchanged slaves, furs, wax, and honey with the Abbasid Caliphate and the Volga Bulgars for thousands of silver dirhams. The scale of this trade is almost impossible to comprehend. Archaeologists have found Islamic dirhams across Scandinavia in quantities that reflect an enormous sustained flow of silver from the Middle East into Northern Europe over centuries. The island of Gotland in Sweden alone has produced more silver hoards from the Viking Age than any comparable area in the world. The silver buried in Gotland's soil came from Iraq, from Iran, from Central Asia, carried north along the great river systems by Viking traders who understood exactly what they had and exactly what it was worth. Because Islamic dirhams were minted with a high level of purity and consistent weight, they functioned as the gold standard of the Viking economy. This is the crucial detail. The Vikings did not value the dirham as a coin. They did not care whose face was on it or what inscription it carried. What they cared about was the silver content, which was high and consistent. A dirham was valuable not because it was Islamic currency, but because it was a reliable, predictable weight of high-quality silver. The moment it entered the Viking economy, it ceased to be a coin and became raw material. Nearly 28% of Byzantine coins found in Scandinavia bear holes, so they could be used as decorations or jewelry. Read that again. Byzantine coins, some of the most sophisticated currency in the medieval world, were drilled with holes and turned into jewelry by the Vikings who received them. To a Viking, the difference between a coin and an arm ring was not monetary. It was aesthetic. Both were silver. Both weighed what they weighed. Both could be cut if needed. Merchants did not trust blindly. Silver could be diluted, mixed with copper or lead to look like pure silver while containing significantly less. To test purity, Viking traders used a technique called nicking. You pressed a sharp tool into the surface of the silver and peeled back a tiny sliver to check the color and consistency beneath the surface. A piece of genuinely pure silver would look the same all the way through. A piece of diluted silver would reveal itself. Silver purity was constantly tested. Merchants would nick or bend a piece to check that it was solid silver throughout. Archaeological finds show silver pieces with multiple nick marks, test cuts made by multiple different traders over the life of a piece of hacksilver. You can hold a piece of Viking silver in a museum and count how many times it was tested by how many different traders before it ended up in the ground. The arm ring had a specific economic function beyond just being hacksilver. In the political economy of the Viking world, arm rings were the primary mechanism by which a chieftain rewarded his warriors. The sagas use the word ring-giver, ringdrotten, as a standard honorific for a great leader. To be generous with rings was to be a good chieftain. A warrior who followed a great leader expected to receive silver arm rings as compensation for service, for loyalty, for military success. These rings were then worn as both status symbols and as portable wealth. They could be spent, traded, or saved. The political economy and the commercial economy were the same object. Then, something changed. As the Viking Age progressed into the 10th and 11th centuries, coins began to appear in greater numbers and with greater importance. Not as counted currency at first, the early approach of weighing everything continued, but the sheer volume of foreign coins entering Scandinavia, combined with contact with European monetary systems, began to shift things. Viking rulers began minting their own coins. Such as the silver pennies produced under King Knut and later Scandinavian monarchs, reflecting a shift towards a more formal monetary system. This minting of coins was not just economic, it was political. A king who could mint his own coins was a king who controlled the standard of exchange within his territory. It was a declaration of sovereignty. The shift from weighing silver to counting coins reflects the shift from the Viking Age's fluid, stateless economy to the more organized kingdoms that emerged toward the end of the period. Coins reigned supreme in the 10th to 12th century hoards. These later collections will almost exclusively contain silver coins and hacksilver, with the majority of the weight being coins. The Viking hoards tell the story of this transition perfectly. Early hoards contain complete jewelry objects, arm rings, brooches, neck rings. Mid-period hoards contain a mixture of hacksilver fragments and foreign coins. Late-period hoards are dominated by coins. You can read the entire economic history of the Viking Age in the changing contents of the things they buried in the ground. The Bedale hoard, found in North Yorkshire in 2012, contained silver ingots and neck rings dating to the late 9th or early 10th century. Analysis of the silver revealed something remarkable. Some of it had come from over 3,000 miles away, its chemical signature matching silver sources in what is now Iraq and Iran. Viking silver did not just come from raids on English monasteries. It had traveled further than most medieval Europeans ever would in their entire lives, passing through dozens of hands and thousands of miles of trade routes before ending up buried in an English field. There was also a darker element of the economy that cannot be left out. Slaves were among the most valuable commodities in the Viking trade network. The Old Norse word thrall, from which the modern English word enthrall derives, referred to an enslaved person. Thralls were acquired through raids, purchased from other traders, and sold across the trading networks. In the transactions with the Islamic world that brought so much silver north, enslaved people were among the primary goods being offered in exchange. The silver economy and the slave economy were the same economy. You cannot talk about where the silver came from without acknowledging what was traded for it. Now back to the man in the Hedeby market with his knife and his scales. He is not doing something primitive. He is operating a sophisticated, flexible, internationally connected monetary system that has no single point of failure. If the Islamic Caliphate stops sending dirhams, he can still use the silver from English raids. If there are no English raids this year, he can melt down old jewelry. If he runs out of silver entirely, he can fall back on barter for local transactions. The system has redundancy built into it by its very nature. Weight is weight. Silver is silver. The scale does not lie. The Russian word ruble, still the name of Russia's currency today, comes from the Russian verb meaning to chop. The practice of chopping silver into pieces, carried out by the Viking Rus traders along the Volga over 1,000 years ago, is embedded in the name of a modern national currency. Back to the question from the beginning. If you had to carry your wealth on your body right now, how would you do it? The Vikings had an answer that was simultaneously practical and beautiful. You wore it, you displayed it, and when you needed to spend it, you cut it off and put it on a scale. Leave your answer in the comments. If this changed how you think about money and trade, that is exactly what this channel is for. Subscribe. Every video is a piece of history most people never heard told properly. The world has not changed. The currency has. You're welcome.